Okay, so I left off talking about Marvel Comics. Let's keep talking about Marvel Comics. I'm not quite doing everything in the proper order here, but we're talking, early 1960s. This era where Stan Lee, along with Jack Kirby, Steve Ditko's other artists as well, were just cranking out the characters that have endured to this day. And I imagine, even though many of you have never read a comic book, you've probably heard of most of these characters, and you know them mostly from the Avengers movies. Starting off for this video, we have the mighty Thor. Now, Thor is based on Norse mythology. In many ways, it's similar to the original myth, and if you're a student of mine, you already learned about the mythological Thor. Much of the stuff is the same. Mjolnir, the hammer that he throws and it comes back to him, that's all, in the comics, it's in the mythology. However, a few things changed for the comics. One of the biggest things, which you won't find anywhere there in the myths, is he has a secret identity. Because, again, now superheroes are, even though they disappeared at the end of World War II, they're back and they're bigger than ever. So instead of just having a straight-up mythological take on Thor, he was turned into a superhero. And he had a secret identity of Dr. Donald Blake. And he was partially disabled in his leg, and he would walk with a cane, but his cane, or his walking stick, I think to be more technical about it, when he would hit it on the ground, it would turn into Mjolnir, and he would become Thor. And later stories ran with this and expanded on this idea. They've pretty much abandoned this as a story point in the current comics. The movies only made a very vague passing reference to it. Next up, we have Iron Man. Iron Man was originally Tony Stark. He was a millionaire industrialist. Here's the interesting thing with Iron Man. Sometimes the movie versions of characters are so popular that they become influential on the comics characters. In the original comics, he was captured in a country that was essentially Vietnam, but they didn't call it Vietnam. In the movie, he's captured in a country that is essentially Afghanistan, but they don't call it Afghanistan, but it's the same thing. And while he's captive, he builds some armor, and he's able to escape from captivity. His armor in both the original comics and the movie, it protects his heart, and it keeps him alive, so he always has a piece of the armor on him. Now, whether Stan Lee intended this or not, what's great about this story is that the character is somebody who is basically selfish. He only cares about himself and his profits, the bottom line, but through this experience, he becomes a better person. And it's wonderful that his suit protects his literal heart, because by becoming Iron Man, he finds his, metaphorical, symbolic heart. And he becomes more human by becoming Iron Man. As for the movies, how they affected the comics is Robert Downey Jr.'s performance was so iconic and it's so memorable that it influenced the way the character is now written. And he has a little bit of that same sense of humor that he had in the movies.
I'm sorry, I don't want to get off on the wrong foot. Do I look at the patch or the eye?
This isn't so unusual for the movies to change the comics. Many of the things we know about Superman, like his kid sidekick, Jimmy Olsen, he was introduced in a radio drama. And of course, movies and cartoons influenced them as well. The very popular character Harley Quinn, she's in the comic books, in the Batman comics, but she was first introduced in the animated series. So this isn't so strange that a movie would change the way the comics are done. And again, the change is not drastic. It's not a completely different thing. But it's there. And that says a lot for the movies, which wouldn't exist if it wasn't for the comics. But the movies were so well done that they have influenced the comics. It's cool the way that works. And next up is Captain America.
You've already talked about Captain America.
Did I? Next up, we have Captain America. Yeah, but remember, I said I would talk about him again. For you big Captain America fans, you're going to maybe get a little disappointed because you're going to be like, wait, that's all you're going to say about Captain America? Captain America is going to come back around in these notes when I get into the 1960s. Huh? So see? So get out! So where I left off with Captain America was basically he disappeared. At the end of World War II, he just, I guess he didn't seem very relevant to people because the Nazis were defeated, Imperial Japan was defeated. Captain America just didn't seem to mean much. And he, as I showed you guys, he had all these bizarre adventures. It became almost more like a sci-fi horror kind of a comic, almost unrecognizable to your modern day Captain America fan. Whether a fan of the comics or the movies, those stories are very odd. But Stan Lee decided to bring him back because of, again, it's the return of the superheroes. And superheroes are popular, so hey, used to have a lot of success with that Captain America guy, and DC Comics, all across the way, they've managed to revive some of their older characters. They managed to revive the Flash and Green Lantern, created new versions, and Marvel did that with the Human Torch. But this was not a new Captain America. This was the original Captain America. It was Steve Rogers. If you know Captain America from the movies...
Holy mackerel.
No, not that movie. Oh, especially not that movie.
We all know this is about trying to win the war. You can't do that without bullets and bandages, tanks and tents. Now that's where you come in. Every bond you buy will help protect someone you love. Keep our boys armed and ready, and the Germans will think twice about trying to get the drop on us.
Okay, that's better. If you know Captain America from the movies, you know the basic premise. He was frozen in ice, he's brought back in the modern age, and he becomes the leader of the Avengers. When you take a look at the artwork, comparing the original Captain America comic to what was going on in the 60s, not only do you see an evolution in the style of comic book art, but you see an evolution specifically in Jack Kirby's artwork. Because Jack Kirby, you may or may not recall, he was one of the co-creators of Captain America, he along with Joe Simon. And he was drawing these adventures of Captain America when Stan Lee decided to revive him. You can really see the change in Kirby's style. I can make a whole video about Kirby, but I got to move on with this for right now. Here's what I love about Captain America, why he's one of my favorite characters. This idea of taking Captain America and bringing him into the modern age. Now, originally, it was only, like a 20-year gap from World War II to the 1960s. But it worked back then, and it works even better now, I think. And whether Stan Lee intended this or not, again, it really doesn't matter, because sometimes when it comes to symbolism and what things mean, and I'm really going to expand on this idea when I talk about the X-Men, sometimes it's not so much about the author's intention, but the way people read it and the way the audience responds to it. And the way that I respond to Captain America, and I think a lot of other people do too, is you look at what he originally was. He was a World War II hero, the symbol of America and our fighting spirit. Lots of things have happened since World War II. I think you're pretty hard-pressed, whether you're talking about liberals or conservatives or people in between or people on the fringes. Generally speaking, most Americans agree that it was a good thing that we fought the Nazis and that the Nazis were ultimately defeated. Since then, Korean War, Vietnam War, countless wars in the Middle East, everything that's going on, the war on terror, Americans are much more divided on these issues. It's been a long time, and while I may be oversimplifying what was going on during World War II, because certainly there were some people who were isolationists, didn't want to have anything to do with it, but that's generally how we as Americans, we remember this. This was a united America. And now bringing him back, and it was a divided America in the 60s, it's a divided America now, even more so. To bring this symbol of a united America back and have him somewhat confused with the world that he is coming into, where things are not quite so simple, not quite so black and white, because Again, I'm oversimplifying, but if you got to pick somebody to be the bad guy in World War II, pretty easy to pick the Nazis. Did we do everything right? Were we always good in every single action we did? Of course not. But compared to the Nazis, there you go. So taking Captain America as somebody who symbolizes this into the modern age, this is just a wonderful metaphor for what America should be and what America can be. And I've known people of various political stripes who identify with Captain America, who love Captain America. Obviously, people who are very conservative and perhaps patriotic, they like him because he's just an obvious symbol of America. But I find a lot of people who lean a bit more left, count myself amongst them, consider myself more liberal, and while I'm patriotic, depending on what you mean by that word, I'm not overtly patriotic. I love Captain America. I think he's fantastic. So this is why he's a really powerful symbol for America and what America can and should be.